This is STARS Officer Rebecca Chambers, and you're listening to Let's Talk Resident Evil Podcast.
What is going on, everyone? Anthony here, and welcome back to another episode of the Let's Talk Resident Evil Podcast. And this is another episode where I have a guest on, and I am very happy to welcome back Sean. You might know him from Carrier, A Raccoon City Story, and he is here to promote and also just to chat, but episode 2 is coming out. Thanks for joining me once again, man.
Hey, great to be back again, man. Hello again, Internet. It's been a while.
Yes, we are here. We've been, last time people saw the show, well, I mean, this show was pretty recently posted, but it was recorded back in March, in the middle of March. So there's been a couple months of, stuff coming out, Resident Evil stuff coming out. But, what have you been up to in the world of Sean over there? What's been going on in these past couple months with getting everything not only done with the episode, but just with life in general? How have you been, man?
It's been ups and downs, a lot of ups and downs, especially since March. There's a whole lot of things that happened since then. So I've been steadily making progress in episode 2, but outside of that, I got an old band of mine back together that we all felt like we just really loved the material we were putting out. It's my old band, Sewerside Bombers. At the time of this recording, it's actually our 6-year anniversary, which shall be, once we're done here, I'm going to be heading out to go play the show. And we're in the middle of recording our 4th recording, our first full-length album. So I've been dedicating a lot of time between writing stuff for Carrier and then writing up new material for this other band, which we wrote, in one night we wrote 6 songs. So that was just a whole bunch of creative energy split between both. So I was kind of just really revving in the red there. There was a bit of a bad situation that happened in April. I'm not sure if anyone's been following the page has kind of been aware of it, but here in Fort Lauderdale, we had probably the worst rainstorm in, they say, 1,000 years. I don't know who's keeping track. But it got really bad. It flooded about 4 to 5 feet deep worth of water.
No way.
I'm on the 2nd floor, luckily, but my car, both my car and my fiance's car, was wrecked, toast. We had gators just hanging around by the steps of our apartment. And yeah, just spent about a good couple of months just no car, biking anywhere that I could, roads flooded everywhere.
No.
Luckily,
no. Damn.
Yeah, I mean, that'll definitely take the wind out of your sails too. Luckily, it's one thing to lose your car. We had friends who lost their house, so luckily ours stayed fine, but losing your car it's not pleasant. So I had to deal with that. That took some time out of everything else to make sure I got squared away. Luckily, it's over and back. Got a new car downstairs.
Nice.
It's fucking perfect. And then, yeah, once all that stuff was put aside, I got to switch gears back into Carrier, get the story rolling, get the shots taken, get the photo shoots done, and I have one last session of voiceover recordings to get done this weekend, and that'll be it. And I do intend for there to be a bit of a wrap-up party once that is done. Got some friends who I promised them some spots on it. They're going to be knocking their stuff out this weekend, and now it's here. It's definitely come a long way. I mean, the interesting thing to note is that even though this has been a year of progress, rather than go through and redo everything that I had in the past, I kind of just wanted to keep some of the stuff, the artwork that I'd done from the beginning of the episode as is, because I just like to see a bit of that evolution of the work. But you'll notice that some stuff slowly evolves along the episode. But a lot of work went into just perfecting the craft of what I was doing here. This is actually the first episode that, not to spoil it too much, but I, on my own, figure out how to choreograph a barroom brawl, a fist fight. Just with pictures. So required a lot of other comic book research as to how that was done in their aspect. So this time around, it's actually pretty interesting. It was a fun experiment to try to get done, and I think it came out pretty good.
Do you think the bar fight was probably the hardest challenge during this process, or what do you think it was creatively on the episode that you think was the harder challenge than before?
I mean, yeah, a bit more of the. This is more of a challenge than last time because the last one, I think the only action sequence I had was this cool take on just a single gunshot being fired. This one, it's more active. It's more so how to get the artwork together and get the imagery together. What should be included in the art, in the image, what shouldn't be. What perspective do I want it to be focused on? How that panel should show up. One thing that my partner on the project, Noah, who's not here with us right now, but I'll be meeting up with him later tonight. He's my drummer. Is he liked the idea that I did with the last one where I synchronized the gunshot up with the music playing. So his idea was take it even further and kind of synchronize the fight with the music that we recorded for that sequence. So that was a tricky part, but like not just to have it pop up on hits, but how it becomes organic and how to make it really just flashy. So that was the interesting part. It wasn't hard. I didn't think it was impossible to do. It was just, well, this is something that I've never done, but I know I can make it work. And it just took a lot of research. And yeah, I think it came out pretty good.
Yeah, man, that's really cool. And I know especially when it comes to, having, the long process of trying to record everything and have it sound just right, and like I can't imagine, especially with like a brawl like that, like how to try to like wrap your brain around like, damn, how are we gonna have all these sound effects and everything come through where it sounds just like has that natural flow. And you've done it, so far up into this point, but I think it's cool that you're trying to push each time to make it a little more involved and like, not just get too comfortable doing the same thing, trying to challenge yourself. And I'm sure you're used to that too, especially with the music side of things too, just trying to push yourself, like be like, all right, let's try this now. Let me try to tackle this part of the project that might be a little bit more, more of a time consuming one.
Yeah, the fun thing about that when trying just to get the sound down for like a sequence like that is there's a lot of just me going into my closet because it's the most soundproof thing that I got for when I want to do, just doing grunts over and over again in front of a microphone.
Yeah.
I'm sure like, the walls here in my apartment are thin, so I'm sure the neighbors on the other side could hear me just going, ugh, ooh.
Yeah.
So just fun stuff like that, which is when you think about it, just casually, you don't think about the small details that go into something like that. So luckily it's just, and whenever some of the other people aren't available to do it, that's the beauty of just the sound equipment of editing now. There was a couple of times I dubbed in my voice, my grunts, and just play with the pitch a little bit so it sounds like someone else. You do what you can to get the job done,
Sure.
and that's kind of just how I'm playing it this time around. So, but it was a fun experience to go through for sure. Not the first time I've done something like that though. I think like 3 years ago when everything first shut down and I first started working from home remotely, my job had issued me a MacBook, and on every MacBook comes GarageBand.
Oh yeah.
So I was bored and I wanted to kind of just screw around with my own song for the fun of it since we couldn't meet up because of quarantine. And rather than get the kind of equipment to figure it out, what I had done was I took just a pair of headphones like these, plugged them into my amp that has a headphone outlet, took my phone, and then just stuffed it between the earmuffs, and then played my guitar, and that's how I recorded the guitar and bass parts. And then for the vocals for this little song that I wrote, I just went into my bed, put all the blankets and everything on top of me, and screamed into my laptop. And that's how I did it.
Yeah, it's like you're just like, all right, I'm just gonna do this completely by myself, DIY. You just get it done, just get it to sound the best it can. Just having that the control over the music too on this project, that's a really because I can't imagine like having this project, then you wouldn't have any control over them. You would just be using like normal Resident Evil music, like you're going to the full extent and recording these tracks, and I really like that. I think that also gives it a very unique thing because we can get a whole Carrier soundtrack, that has all the tracks, you know what I mean, or stuff that you've used, so that's the thing. I like that it also has that unique approach to not only showcasing this this fan-made story, but also just having a soundtrack that is also different. It's not just Resident Evil OST just placed in there.
Yeah, it's we definitely tend to meld better with the songs that involve like some instruments in them, just because that's usually where me and Noah have a better concept of how to make that music. He does experiment a lot with other um, versions of the music as well. I think the closing song, like a couple of the songs we put in the first episode that sound very more like industrial, that was all him, just playing around with the ideas I sent him. I do have a SoundCloud out too that has all the tracks on that first episode
Oh,
available.
nice.
But yeah, this time around, it's more it's a bit of a blend of that, but there's more instrument heavy songs that are in it. A lot of it is like stuff that he recorded on his own, just slide guitar stuff, and it just sounds so gritty and so raw. Something that's like, you know what, it to me it just fits within it, and I like how it sounds. So we just put it in there when we can.
Oh yeah, and especially when you're dealing with something that's showing that darkness of Raccoon City, showing like the in betweens, the things that like the true, because there was like always the layer of Raccoon City that was the general public, and then there's like that other layer that's just like you said, completely gritty and sleazy and dirty because there's so much going on behind the scenes. And it's really cool how you're able to explore this with this project. And yeah, man, I'm really excited to see the thing premiere and actually see the response as well, because there's just, again, that diehard community within Resident Evil that like to see something like this that's that's refreshing, that's fresh.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. Is I've spoken to or seen a lot of feedback from people that that's the thing that I'm doing with that, with giving it a gritty side. Granted, I've seen some feedback where they can't really, it's not, they don't comprehend it. It's just because the games didn't show it doesn't mean it's not there. I am taking a bit of a creative liberties with my approach in my presentation of Raccoon City in this aspect, just because that's part of the point of what I wanted to tell this for is um, I felt like if I was going to tell the Raccoon City strictly from the ones that we see in the games, especially the original ones, it would be too much of like a clean, pristine little town. Because if you look through the games, the original ones, and you look through a lot of like read the environmental logs and everything, it just seems like a nice, quaint little town. And to me, it's like, well, I could expand a bit beyond that. I am kind of incorporating a bit more of the remake side of the story again, just because that larger city scale really, to at least for me, it works to tell that noir film setting, or that film noir setting, a bit easier. It's a bit more organic that way. But yeah, I mean, it's just kind of take that perspective of what you see of Raccoon City and flip it, and oh wow, there's actually something dirtier than what we come to know from the games. And that's kind of what I'm playing with. I'm not saying that that's how it is. It's just that's what that's my approach to it this time.
Exactly, especially when like the truths and the lies that Umbrella was presenting, and it's like you can really believe what you see in your story that you're creating, because again it just kind of goes so well with that evil twist that is like kind of like twisting the knife, so to speak, and be like, all right, yeah, this is the real side of things. There's the fake facade, and then there's what's really going down, and showing of the crime, and showing of like the betrayal that happens to its citizens that are there. And I think I think a lot of people just like to see more Raccoon City in any which way, even in a fan project like this, just because it's your interpretation, like you said, but you're also pulling from what and you're also a real big fan of the S.D. Perry novels too, where it kind of went into these like details and these things. It was explaining like little things that, like, again, people say, okay, yeah, like she would write stuff in those books that wasn't necessarily like canon per se, but it was adding that other layer of like just what you would picture in your head when you would read that, or it's just unlocking another layer to it.
Yeah, and the other thing that I'm trying to explore with as well, my take on the kind of crime and the Umbrella Corporation. This story is there is a bit of like a three-tier level of, I guess, criminal activity. You got, the way I summed it up is the thugs run the streets, and the wealthy elite, they scheme up in their penthouse suites, and Umbrella just watches over it all. Everyone knows, okay, it's an ongoing game between the wealthy elite kind of crime families and the thugs that run the streets, the gangs. They're constantly battling with each other, but they both know stay the hell out of the way of the corporation because the corporation owns everything. You don't fuck with Umbrella.
Right.
Which is why in that first episode, when all of a sudden this guy out of nowhere, decked out in a leather jacket, just drives his car bomb into the Umbrella Corporation research facility, that's what sparks the investigation. Is no one in this town, no one would do that. They are smart, and even the dumbest criminals know you don't do something like that because you know what the backlash is going to be. So that's why character, the detective Sam, he just suspects like this doesn't make any sense. But everyone else kind of plays into that, a bit of that stereotypical like police cop, they want action type of role, which is why, oh, we're ready to go after the bad guys right now. We clearly have it seen on the video camera that it's a guy from the ABC gang that's emblazoned on the back of his leather jacket. They clearly did it. We got to go get them. And my character's like, that doesn't, they know better than that. There's got to be something more here. So that's where we're kind of branching down into that direction, where that's where he finds himself at odds and at conflict with his, with the RPD and other parties involved.
And that's what I like about it, like trying to follow a character that knows the truth or trying to unravel the truth, and there's like these roadblocks in the way of like, that we're going to try to, stay on this narrative that we want, you know what I mean? So I always like following stories like that, where it's just someone that's like out for that justice for the people that have been killed and the things that are going down or what's affecting them personally. And that's, again, that's what I love about something like this, that's bringing just, a different side to it, that again, like following these characters, it just feels like you can relate to them, because I feel like a lot of the similarities between what we might have seen in some of the other Resident Evil characters, like, again, I'm sure that shines through with your inspiration, like, is there one Resident Evil character that like is your favorite, that you're always just like, that's like, that's my guy that I always like playing in games or seeing in the movies? Like, what was your favorite Resident Evil character? I don't think I asked you this last time.
Yeah, it was a bit of I did touch on the topic, but it was a bit of a toss-up between, yeah, it's a toss-up between like Chris and Leon,
Right.
and a bit of Wesker. But I would say, because the way that the characters are so now different now than how they were when they started, it's kind of hard to really lock it down. But I would say for me, to this date, my favorite character is still Chris from the earlier games.
Okay.
Like from RE1 up to Code Veronica, because he still felt like just the odd man out, so to speak. He felt like the everyman to a degree.
Yeah.
Whereas now I don't really get that perspective on him when he's walking around with tree trunk boulders and
Yeah.
or tree trunk sized arms punching boulders and everything. But like, it's the small details that really speak that character to me. I loved him at first when I saw him in the PlayStation edition, for right up until Code Veronica, and then when they released the remake back in 2002, like when you go to his character selection screen in the remake and you see his badge, you see there's a penny stuck inside of the ID badge.
Yeah.
Like, I felt like that was a small detail that alluded to him being very disorganized. Like when you see in Resident Evil 2, when you check over his desk, it says the owner of this desk, it's a mess. The owner's probably very disorganized. I felt that like, that's relatable. I'm a mess. I leave stuff everywhere too.
Right.
So Chris just felt more of like the everyman in that situation, and everything else about him just I really liked too. His design. I liked his old design from the first games, because clearly they were inspired by Top Gun with Tom Cruise.
Oh, yeah.
And like, I like that it still spoke like this interpretation that Japan had of Americana. So they thought like the classic American bravado rock and roll guy. He's got thick, kind of spiky hair, a bit of like some stubble, a leather jacket, a motorcycle. I just like their depiction of it, because it feels like they thought an American cop was like the equivalent of what we had in like the 80s in the action movies.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you got like Leon. He has, Leon's got like the
Leon's got the long hair,
the pretty boy kind of the poster boy, because that's what he kind of ended up becoming for Resident Evil in many ways. And I think, and you're right, like Chris, I think definitely hit differently in that like one to Code Veronica, like him, because I just beat Code Veronica on stream the other day. It's probably only my third time beating it on the channel, but like just replaying it, I'm like, man, I really liked Chris and Claire's like working together, like their dynamic. If they ever did do something like a remake, which I know that's like a popular topic, but I would like to see them balance them out a little bit more. Maybe have Chris a little bit more involved with Claire more. I know they worked. I know the purpose is that they're separated and then he comes on the island later, but I'd like them to kind of balance that out because I really enjoyed Chris in that game. It just kind of hit me like replaying it. I'm like, man, like no one really talks about, like, people are quick to shit on Chris Redfield sometimes, but like they don't really talk about his portrayal in Code Veronica being so badass, and like the scenes with him, between him and Wesker in Code Veronica X too, with those extra scenes. I mean, I don't know, man. It was probably one of my favorite portrayals of Chris in Code Veronica.
Yeah, Chris gets. I'm sure if you dug into it, it comes from the later games, probably from 5 on. It felt like they kind of just turned him into more of like a
more hokey,
stoic,
right? Like, I don't
hokey,
know,
kind of like a jock meathead. It's, for me, it's the thing that really sets it apart is like, look, if you're gonna make him like that, fine, I guess, but can you at least give him back his haircut? I'm not a big fan of this like push forward like Caesar style haircut that he's got.
No, it was definitely he's definitely been through, and he's been through probably some of the most design changes, which is weird. You know what I mean? But, and speaking of some of our original characters, I kind of want to segue this. Now, as far as, I just wanted to say real quick before I get too off topic there, with the Carrier episode, it's premiering on Biohazard Declassified on YouTube, correct?
Yes, on YouTube.
Okay.
It'll premiere on Biohazard Declassified, and after that it'll be available on the YouTube channel, my Carrier YouTube channel.
Perfect. Okay, cool. So I'll put those links down below. So that's where episode 2 is going to be dropping. So obviously stay tuned for that, and it's going to be an awesome event. You're going to be premiering it, so it's going to be, everyone can watch it live. So that'll be really cool to just get that interaction. But I wanted to kind of talk with you because we were texting earlier, and then I realized that you did see Resident Evil Death Island, and that's the more like recent Resident Evil release. Since we've talked, RE4 remake has come and gone. We'll talk about that, but first I wanted to discuss Death Island because I reviewed it. I did a podcast kind of talking about it point by point. I did a review on it that was kind of more bite-sized, no spoilers. But I didn't think it was something that, I think a lot of people were going to be split on. But to be honest with you, I'm getting a lot of comments, and I'm getting a lot of positive, but I'm also getting some that are like fair, constructive criticism. There's the haters that are like, blah, 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 this sucks because whatever. But like, there's people that are actually leaving like, comments as to why. And I kind of wanted to see, how you felt about the movie, because you kind of hinted in the text, you're like, all right, we might feel a little bit different for this one, but that's what I like. I like these conversations. So how did you, I guess, go into Death Island? Like maybe what you thought it was going to be to what it ended up being for you towards the end for Death Island?
Well, I'll start off by saying I'm not one of those people that hate it and want to shit on it. I don't feel that way about anything that Resident Evil has really put out.
Sure.
But this one, I had low expectations going in, only because just all the CGI related content that has been put out by Capcom, Resident Evil related, just has not been that great in my opinion. With the exception of the 4D Executor. I don't see that really getting mentioned a lot when people mention the CGI films. That 4D Executor, which I believe was the first one.
Yeah.
But that's because it takes place in Raccoon City. And it is a bit of like an amalgamation of what would happen if we had a creature like the Thing put into Resident Evil, which I don't think people talk about it enough. But the first one, that, remember the big event behind Degeneration? So Leon was in it, and I was like, okay, now we're taking a stab at animated movies. Let's watch that. And that one didn't really hit the mark for me. And then everyone after that, especially that recent Netflix series,
Infinite Darkness.
Infinite Darkness. The quality just, it's more so the writing just doesn't feel like it's too fleshed out. So when I went into this one, I kind of had the same level of expectations. Like, well, I'm not going to expect to get my mind blown or find anything that's just like, wow, this turned changes my opinion of the CGI films. It kind of just reinforced it. And it's just, I look at it as, you know what, it's still entertainment. I understand when people look at it and they love seeing all the characters grouped into one. I can comprehend that there's people that have a lot more invested into these characters than I do. And yeah, there's, who am I to deny them that joy of seeing all of them taking that Avengers pose there. But for me, it's just, it was too, I try not to overanalyze the plot, but something just like the dialogue, I guess, is the one thing that I would start off with as being like not too well put together. And it's one of those things why I wonder, is this one of those situations where things got lost in translation? Kind of like how the first game's dialogue was a bit wonky.
Right.
Because I wonder if they wrote the screenplay and the dialogue in Japanese, and then this is the English translation to its best degree. Because I'm well aware that when it comes to languages, especially in Chinese and Japanese as well, that they have so many more different phrases and uses that would describe one word in English.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It feels like there's just a bit of like translation issue there, and they just try to make up those blank spots on their own. But when you have like some of the plot just didn't really fit right with me. Like for one thing, the main villain,
Dylan.
Sorry if I'm going into his Dylan. Yeah, the spoiler. I hope I'm not going any spoiler territory
That's
for
all right.
everyone.
Well,
but,
if you haven't seen the film at this point, guys, just pause it and come back to this conversation, because at this point, I already did the spoiler podcast, so all bets are off. So we'll talk about it now. Go ahead.
Yeah. So when Dylan's kind of just roasting everyone, and I think kind of find that funny.
Yeah, that was probably funny. And he just came at Chris really hard. He's like, Chris, you've lost men on every mission. It's like, it's even true in Village, right? So
very true.
Yeah.
And it's just, when he's kind of calling everyone out, like, really on the nose, do you know what it's like, what it feels like to have to kill your best friend after watching him turn? And not one person spoke up about that. I figured, your pain, everyone else here is probably the closest that they've come to sharing the same pain as you. Like, all right, well, dude, Leon, his first day at work, had to kill Marvin. Granted, you might not have played that scenario if that's the way you want to play it. Okay. Resident Evil 6, Leon shot the fucking president in the face.
Yes.
He's had to deal with that on more than one occasion, and not one person spoke up about that.
They didn't mention Raccoon City because he talks about his friend, but he didn't even say, in Raccoon City, because then they could have been like, well, we went through the whole escape. Like, nobody said anything. And I understand that, most of them were infected in the cell, but, like, they had enough to say, make jokes like Leon's like, it's a living, and all these, you would think they would have at least, or even Jill, who was uninfected at that conversation, would have been like, hey, I went through this, and this, and like, I had to witness, me almost killing my friends because of Wesker's control and like all this stuff. There was not like, I agree there definitely was like, Dylan himself just seemed very cookie cutter, and some of the dialogue did seem very like just very strange with the delivery. It does seem that way. And I watched it a third time because of the 4K came in. And yeah, it's like I started to notice like a little things too, like the third time through. I'm like, okay, some of this stuff, I can see some people not putting this over as much. And it's not, like you said, it's not coming from a place of hate. It's just because I agree with Infinite Darkness, especially. It's a show, it's a show, which is fine, but you didn't really write it like a show. You wrote it like an hour and a half CGI film that was cut up into episodes.
I actually have something to say on behalf of that too,
Sure.
Because the other thing that kind of just still I couldn't get out of my head is just the complete like flip flop that Capcom seems to be doing with the CGI material now, and with the line of voice they have available. Back to the previous voice actors for Chris and Leon,
right, from Vendetta
from Vendetta, and so that kind of just again classic Capcom, not committing to consistency. But we have Infinite Darkness that has Nick Apostolidis as Leon. So I started to wonder, that's got to be, I don't know the specifics of it, but that to me seems like there's some kind of contractual opposition there. Because the initial thought I had was, well, what if the people who played Chris and Leon in the movie, I forget their names.
Matthew Mercer
but,
and Kevin Dorman, I believe, are the two.
Yeah.
So Matthew Mercer played Leon, and then Kevin Dorman was Chris.
I would suspect that they have some kind of contract written out that guarantees them X amount of CGI movies from Capcom. And because they had Infinite Darkness rated in the pipe to go and riding on the tail end of, the release of Resident Evil 2 Remake and then Resident Evil 4 Remake coming out, so Nick is a very hot commodity right now. Because the contract still stipulated that Matthew Mercer is Leon in the films, they probably had Infinite Darkness written out as a movie, and at the last minute diced it up into episodes so they could get around that loophole.
Sure.
So that way,
that's actually a good point. I didn't even think about that way.
And then them keeping Stephanie Panicello on as Claire. I think a while ago they wrote out Allison Court, and I think there was a lot of debate around that because they had to do something like they weren't hired on specific actors.
They went non-union basically.
Yeah.
And I'm looking it up here. That's what I'm looking at. So Matthew Mercer started playing Leon in RE6. So they basically went. So basically, he's been playing the older Leon, I guess, what you would consider. But you're right. Like it's interesting because they kind of switch all the time, and it's back and forth. And the Nick Apostolides thing, like it didn't really make sense with him in Infinite Darkness. But now that you mention that, it makes it seem like like the films are kind of one thing, and then they just made Infinite Darkness what it was, and it very much seemed like it was an afterthought in many ways. Because I already remember most of these CGI films over what happened in Infinite Darkness. Like, I might have remembered when I talked about it when it came out, but, like, at least the other ones had little, like, things that I do remember from, like, little key things that I thought were cool. Couldn't even tell you one in Infinite Darkness, And it was left on such a weird cliffhanger. Like, Claire and Leon having that disagreement.
Yeah. I mean, I could tell you a couple of things that stood out for me as memorable moments in the show that I don't think they intended it to be. We were watching it with my fiance, and the scene where it shows them, like the early scenes of them in the desert battle sequences, and there's a part where like one of the soldiers is kind of moving, crouching through cover, and all of a sudden it looks like you get like crazy spider legs. I don't know. It looked like some kind of issue with the animation. It just looked fucking weird. And then one thing that like I just don't understand in the scene with the zombies, they start to infest the White House. That one guy just shoots a zombie, it jumps on top of him, and he just launches that sucker up into the air and looks over, and it's just hanging on top of a fucking chandelier. Like, what? How did we get to that point? What happened here?
Yeah, where he just threw a grown-ass man up on a chandelier. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
what the hell is that,
The skinny wisp of an agent man just launched this guy like a good, like, 10 feet up in the air.
Yeah, it's like, what is he, related to, someone that's infected, like Wesker or something? Like, what's going on here, That's... Yeah, like you said, that's a good point, right? The animation. I think a lot of people talk about that because I thought the animation with Vendetta, the last film, I should say, was pretty good. I mean, I thought it looked good. And then when I saw Infinite Darkness, then I was like, I could see like some of it just didn't seem right. Like it wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen, but it definitely seemed lesser than Vendetta, right? And then with this new film, I was like, okay, it's back. They got that kind of feel like there's a couple things here and there, but it didn't really look too janky. But
yeah,
I see what you're saying definitely, because I do remember there were moments that I made some notes on about Infinite Darkness, about like why it seemed like there was some kind of quality dip, and maybe there was a money thing, maybe it was a budget thing. I can see them maybe putting more into these films because they probably make a lot of money internationally because they actually release them over there. Where Vendetta was released over here for like 4 or 5 days in the States everywhere. I know it premiered in a couple different states here, but like, why wouldn't they do that for this film? Because this seemed more like an event type film of getting Jill back. It seemed more of an epic type film where I was happy to see Vendetta in a theater, and it was really cool to like be surrounded by RE fans that just all had the same kind of sense of humor, and like we were all in on the meta, so to speak, So some of it was like hilarious seeing it in the theater. But even then, Vendetta seemed like it was a lot over the top shit. So with Death Island, they scaled it down a bit, which was cool. But I did like the fact that we got some kind of moments with Jill and Chris talking in Death Island. But I do also wish that there was more of like a lengthier discussion, I guess, but maybe that's just the fan in me like wanting more because it's been so long. But like, how did you feel about Jill's return? Because that's kind of like the biggest thing that most fans were looking forward to. Did you feel like they did Jill Valentine justice with how long she's been away, not including RE3 remake, obviously?
Yeah, I mean, I had two perspectives on that. One of them, I tried to make sure I watched it as just this is Jill being brought back into the storyline, and it's great that we get to see her and Chris together. Like, it feels surreal when I think about it. Like, wow, yeah, the last time we saw them together was the fifth game, which was 2009.
Yes.
Feels like they kind of play the more, I want to say the safe route, but the more general route. So, like the interaction between them, and clearly she's going through some PTSD. I just think that, again, it's one of those things where I would have liked to see that played out a little bit more because it doesn't look like it affected her much. Like being under control, having to contend with, attacking her friends, being under Wesker's control. Much like how we were treated to like the one dream sequence in Resident Evil 3 Remake, that it seems like it's mentioned, one and done, and then she's just back to just being, ass kicking left and right. I would like to see some. I don't think there was enough moments of vulnerability that were shown to kind of give that
Sure.
presentation. But between her and Chris, again, it felt service level. There's some cool quips between the two of them, but it didn't feel like it got that deep. Like I would like to know, like outside of the mission perspective, like how are you living with yourself? It seems like they're always just focused on the mission objective. That might just be cut to runtime. Like we don't really have time to get into what's life like been for you outside of missions because we got to get the story rolling.
It's like less than 90 minutes, not even including credits. You know what I mean? So they try to get in and get out. But yeah, I honestly do agree with you, man, because I did enjoy Jill and I liked what we got, and she's my favorite RE character or just video game character in general. And I kind of wish they went a little. I'm happy with what we got. I wasn't upset, and I wasn't upset about Nikki's performance either because I thought she did a really good job, Nicole Tompkins.
Yeah.
But I just wish that they also made her look different. And I understand people are saying, "Oh, well, Capcom wants her to look a certain way," and blah blah blah. But listen, like you're not going to look like you're in your 20s, and everyone else looks like older. Some people say that Claire looks like this, Chris looks like this, but at the same time, like I don't think Jill should look like 1998 Jill. She should look a little bit different. At least give her a different fucking outfit.
Seriously, that I don't understand that.
At least give her a different outfit. Like I understand she goes to the island and she has like a coat on for like that split second, but that thing comes right off once shit starts hitting the fan immediately when they go to Alcatraz. And I'm just like, you guys, like, keep her in blue. That's her color, but like change it. You know what I mean? Switch it
put
up.
some sleeves. Like some sleeves would be fine. Just something different,
man. And the thing is like it's not really established because if it's in 2015 and then RE5 is in 09, so is this like her first year back? Like it doesn't say like when she started. Like I don't know if her going into that house was like her first like I'm going in like mission back on the BSAA. There was no real mention of that other than her, saying, well, this is like it's good to have you back, like that kind of thing, like you're back. But like, when did you start? Like you said, there's a little things that like as fans we're thinking of, and some fans will just see it and be like, oh no, it's good, that's fine. But then we're just like, yeah, but there's like that little bit left that I feel like they should have talked about. The one thing I did like in their conversation at the shooting range was, Chris talking about Pierce, because we didn't really get to see his aftermath of that. And so RE6 taking place in 2012 and then in 2013 as well. This is only 2 to 3 years after that, so it would still be affecting him. But even then, he kind of has like it's like emotional for a moment, and then we don't really get to see anything beyond that because it's all about the mission. But I just wish that this is why I think they should try to bring them back or bring Jill back in the main games, because they can really start to explain things at a game's length pace and not be like, all right, this has to be this animated film that's about 90 minutes less, a little bit less than 90 minutes give or take. And it's just like, it's just Jill being my favorite character. I'm like, fuck, like we're pretty close to seeing like the whole emotional side, but it only got emotional for like a second and then it was right back to business. So I kind of wish I understand she was trying to play it off tough, but It's like I kind of wish we got a little bit more. I wasn't upset or dissatisfied, and I liked the action scenes. I thought the CG was good. I thought the voice acting was good for what we got. But I also just think like, man, like I kind of wish it was. I kind of wish the show Infinite Darkness kind of took an approach where they wrote it like a show, they brought the budget in, and they were able to explain these things a little by little, like have 3 episodes of like just Jill's, like what Jill has been going through or her whole thing, like little things like that, because I doubt they're going to go back and do a season 2, but I would have liked them to do more than just like, all right, we're going to tell Claire's story again, Leon's story. It's like, I'm happy they did this now than just waiting for another game to come out and then you have to explain like a lot of what happened. But I still feel like there has to be more explaining to do if she were to even come back in like an RE9, right? Just to bring her back to form, and also to bring some original characters back. You can pepper in new characters, but like I think a lot of fans are kind of looking for that next like game that brings back a lot of characters. It doesn't have to be a whole reunion like this movie was, but just have something that is not what the Winters story kind of gave us. And for me, that wasn't really what I felt like was Resident Evil when we get down to basics of like, we've been with Chris and Jill for 27 years on this journey. They've been in the fight for so long. Why not bring them back for another game because it's been so long? I mean, they tried some new stuff, they tried new characters, so maybe it's time. But I feel like this being the bridge between it like you said, it played a lot of things safe. Obviously, you knew they weren't going to get infected or turned because it's Resident Evil. They're going to survive, and Rebecca's going to come with the cure and stuff. So I like little things like that because it's like you look forward to them getting all together and fighting. I think the Leon and Jill stuff was actually really cool. I like the aquatic liquor fight. That's one of my favorites. But even then, it's like, man, I want to see even more Leon and Jill now, but maybe that's just us saying, please, like, let's see them in a game together, like team up. Like if you're going to do Jill in another game, then you should probably make her interact with these characters as well that we haven't seen before. But I thought it was a really good CGI film in my opinion, but I definitely, I wouldn't say it's flawless. It definitely has some little holes in it here and there, and some fans might say one thing over the other, but I think they did a decent job. But I am getting a lot of people that seem to be a little split on it. But again, like you said, I know for your perspective, you're just coming at a place of like being a fan for years, wanting to see these characters, done right, especially in a writing standpoint, trying to like figure out how they can fit and it's a lot of characters to have in one movie in a short amount of time. That's another thing too, so I think they at least tried to balance it out well. But I thought it would have been cool if they started to kind of introduce this stuff in the show, if they didn't really botch that so bad,
Yeah, just give a bit of like some growth to that storyline, because there's great elements that the movie had that it kind of only just lightly touched. For instance, the Pierce situation, again, reverting back to Dylan's whole rant that you don't know what it's like to watch your friends die. Like literally Chris and Pierce that's the one I see people have the most heartbreak over. And that, again, that's an element for Chris to have some PTSD.
Absolutely.
I know they kind of covered that in the 6th game, but it would be something that would be like a layer of familiarity between Chris and Jill, because it seems like Jill's very closed off to him because she had to suffer through all that. But Chris has his own fair amount of baggage too. No, not to poke any fun at it, but yeah, he's lost a lot of men along the way.
Right.
So he's got that guilt. Jill's got the guilt of also losing friends at her own hands. Chris kind of at his own hands too. But I felt like that's a dynamic that could have been explored more, and it was there. They just didn't really touch it. One of the things that I thought would be an interesting point that I was thinking maybe they'll touch on it. I didn't expect them to. But Jill's just overall aggression in her attacks. It's very like, all right, you're taking out some aggression. You can clearly see that. That's something that I figured that could be an angle, like that is her channeling her trauma. She's taking it all out on
right.
The zombies. And I felt like that would be a great segue into someone just being, hey, you okay? You're really going all out on these. They used to be people, and you're kind of going a bit too hard on it. And then maybe just that's where she kind of opens herself up to, yeah, you know what? I'm still not over what I went through, blah, blah, blah. But just to like circle it back around to Jill's design, because you had mentioned it there
Right.
too. Um, it's the one thing that kind of set me out of the CGI films now, too, is seeing they're kind of now. It's just this again, the flip flop of blurring the separate, what feels like separate timelines together now, because you have the character models for Chris and for Leon, for Rebecca, although Rebecca hasn't been in the games for a while, but they look like their counterparts from the later games.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you say? Kind of like 6.
Yeah.
Then you have now 6 is in the same timeline as the original games. Now you have Jill coming from the remake, which is feels like a separate timeline. You're kind of just shoehorning her into that design along with Claire. The thing that takes me out of it is those CGI films felt like they existed in the universe of the original games, because that felt what they built off of. So it
Right.
made sense for it to be over the top, because 6 was over the top action, 5 was over the top. When they announced 2 remake and they put that out there, I was under the impression that okay, this means they're taking a new direction. They're gonna take a step back from that over the top Call of Duty action and be more of a grounded progression. And it just feels like you did that and you kind of just pulled a fast one on us. Nope, we're going back into that same stride that we were doing. And seeing Jill from the remakes pulled into that, it's like felt like that was a more grounded world that she came from.
Sure.
They put her into this world here. But I will say that the CGI in the movie, I thought it looked great. I mean, that's there's no denying that for sure. A lot of the details on, like, especially the polish when he pulls out his revolver.
Oh yeah.
It looks like a great movie, that's for sure.
Yeah, and that's interesting you bring up the timeline too, because I think a lot of fans are always wondering like what follows what, in terms of like with the remakes now. And I think the way Capcom has kind of presented it is that the remakes and the originals are kind of just layered like on top of each other, because they don't change anything drastically with the events of the end story of those games. So I feel like, and you're right, with the remake stuff, it does feel a little odd because you're seeing like the remake models just being put into, this CGI film, which is taking place from our original game. So it's almost like it's happening side by side, and then we're almost catching up to like, 5 at this point, 'cause that's definitely going to be like their next move. But I think I agree. Like, I think there's a lot of things that just because of the switching of voice actors and the models, it can be a little confusing if you haven't followed it for as long as we have, or anybody that's watching that might have been jumping in from, like, let's say 7 onward. You might be like, oh, why do these characters sound different? Or why does it look, why does Jill look like she hasn't aged like a day? Which, like,
Yeah.
some people would say, again, the virus, that Wesker, like, that was never explained, guys. Like, I just want to let people know that there was no explanation of the virus being in her body still, why she's young. Like, these are all things that, like, people wanted them to explain and explore. And maybe that's part of it, too. Maybe people feel like there wasn't enough justice on her saying, all right, like, this is what I've been through, and this is like why I'm still able to flip off walls and throw knives in the zombies' heads. Maybe she's just fucking ready to go. She's been off in like training. Maybe I wish we saw that. Like, I wish we saw her maybe at the gym, or like just getting back in the zone or something, trying to get physically in shape. But again, there's a little details that we just, we kind of just missed because the story has to be a story. But yeah, little inconsistencies from, a franchise that's 27 years old and has so many different forms of content that's coming out, so it kind of gets lost.
I'd hate to be the guy now that's like part of the new dev team on Capcom that has to be responsible for keeping track of everything. It's got to be a nightmare.
Oh man, yeah. That's why I think maybe with the remakes being like, very similar, but like they're just trying to change things within the gameplay and like to like streamline the stuff, kind of like how they did with RE4, where there's certain sections they kind of just like steered it a little bit, but they didn't completely, piss people off. I know some people are still upset about U3 not being in there, and or it, as people call it, and the cage fight, but that could be in separate ways. I still think Separate Ways is coming.
Right.
They just didn't.
They would be stupid to not do that, because that is everyone's wanting it, everyone's talking about it. It was included in the last game. They would be a terrible move for them to not follow up on it.
Yeah. And Ada and Wesker being in Mercenaries for an update would be awesome. Yeah, man. I mean, I think with Death Island now being the last RE release for a while, Hopefully we'll see some kind of announcement at some point in terms of like, we'll see something at a PlayStation event or a Capcom event that just says, hey, here's Separate Ways. It's coming out, early next year, RE4 Gold Edition. That's what I'm hoping. And then we could move on to like, what's the future of RE? And we know that they always go back into the mainline games. And I kind of was just like, I was so blunt in my last podcast episode. I was like, people that are like, screaming and yelling about like these leaks that are online and people making all these like, it's just like, people are just saying RE9 comes out in X year or whatever. It's like, okay, and like we knew this, I think some of the leaks are just so like obvious or just so like there's no weight behind them anyway, but like it's just so odd. That's like me saying, hey man, they're coming out with a mainline and a remake next. I know it. It's like, yeah, no shit, because that's been their cycle. Yeah. It's been mainline, it's been remake, it's just what they've been doing. So it's like they always have a plan ahead. They're always one step ahead. And I know they put out that survey asking people what they would like to see remade. And I don't think that survey is going to reflect the next remake, but I think it might reflect something down the road. Obviously, Code Veronica is the main screaming answer that most people want to say, especially if 5 is going to get done. So I think that they know what they're doing, and people just have to kind of relax and chill because that stuff will come out when it comes out. You know what I mean? And hopefully RE9 is a step in a different direction where maybe it is just third person now, because the Rose DLC was just third person. Maybe you can switch between third and first person simultaneously from the start, RE4 Remake is getting that VR2 update whenever, I think it's later this year or something, whenever it comes out. And now Village is in VR, so they put that out first, and then they teased. That was the last thing we saw for RE4. The one event we thought we were going to see Separate Ways, it was just an update for a VR2 thing coming out. But how did you feel about Resident Evil 4 Remake? Because I haven't talked to you since it came out. So did you put a lot of hours into it? Did you play it like hell like we all did? We fucking play that thing to oblivion, basically. How did you feel about it?
Yes and no. I put a good amount. So here's the thing about that. I completely contradicted myself on it, because when that game came out, I tried to refrain from it at the time because I made a promise. I think I mentioned it either to Andrew or out loud. I said, I'm not touching this game until episode 2 is done. That'll be my little reward.
Okay.
And of course, I'm totally full of shit because I ended up getting it. I ended up picking it up like a week or two later because man, I can't. I got to check it out.
Oh yeah.
I got to check it out. I got it, and I mean, it's a hell of a game. It is definitely really well done. I will say that I felt like the controls and like the feel, everything felt a bit more tighter in the original one. But that could just be me, because I felt like Leon, he moved quicker, is easier to. I get it. There's a bit of that added realism with Leon's movements and animation in the remake. There's definitely a lot more of a learning curve to when you get the aiming up. Again, I'm someone who, hey, I love the original. You're kind of killing me when I don't get the laser sight right off the bat at the beginning. But I get it, work towards it, it's understandable. No, that was really well done. I do think that they made Leon's character a bit more believable by way of, all right, this Leon still feels reminiscent of the one in the remake. He is not the over-the-top macho bravado that he is from the original one. It does look like something that you could see the Leon from Resident Evil 2 Remake transitioning to this guy. Some of the characters, Luis was a great step up. I think it's one of those things with Carlos. I never had an issue with the original character, but what they improved upon was fantastic.
Absolutely, I agree.
And I do think it was, especially when I look back on it, it does feel like wasted opportunity, because personally, the voice actor who played Luis in the original Resident Evil 4, he's the voice actor for Spider-Man in the PS1 game that came out in 2000. So I had a really solid attachment with him. He's also the voice
game too. That's one of my favorite PlayStation games ever.
Oh, dude.
Yeah.
Favorite one to this day too.
Yeah.
Outside of the PS4 version.
Yeah.
But he also voiced the Puerto Rican Hispanic guy from Extreme Ghostbusters.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that was him.
Wow.
So I'm like, I love this guy, and then he barely got any screen time after the entire game.
I know.
But then in the remake, though, fantastic job with him. I do think despite what they did, Salazar just didn't. No, not Salazar. I can't believe Ramon Salazar. Is he the short guy or the
Yes,
main villain?
Salazar's the shorter guy. Sadler's the main villain.
Sadler, yeah.
The main cult
Confusing their
leader,
names.
Sadler. Yeah.
Sadler just felt like they didn't really give him much weight behind, like, all right, he's evil, he wants to take over the world, but he still didn't feel like someone with a lot of, why should I really, really be invested in this guy?
Mm.
Salazar was great. I mean, the voice actor for him, he definitely did his own take on it. I thought that was great.
Oh man, that castle section was beautiful. Just the
That was,
exploration.
yeah,
Oh man.
fantastic. Knocked it out of the park with that one. That I remember playing that and I'm just dreading. I'm like, well, I like that they switched up the direction a bit, so I'm not thinking the next room's gonna be this. But that entire time leading up, I was like trying like hell to stockpile my ammo because I know that water room's coming up.
Yes.
And I'm like, the game so far has been kicking my ass, and I haven't even reached to the castle yet. Like, oh god, that.
What did
water
you
room's
start
gonna be a
on? Did you start
nightmare.
on standard, or did you do hardcore?
Yeah, I started on standard just because I haven't like played the games consistently enough to be that skilled with the controls.
Right. I started on
I'm not
standard
bad
too,
at
to be
it.
honest. I
Yeah.
saved my hardcore playthrough for the stream, but I also felt like I was like, man, this game is supposed to be a little bit harder, so let me just gauge it with standard. So
Oh, dude, I don't know, but I mean, I've seen people post about it too, but I was struggling with the ammo, dude. I was like damn near like empty the entire time, and I know it's trying to give you that intensity of the feeling, but half the time I'm like, do I have to restart a save? Because I'm going
I'm
up
not
against.
doing good here. Yeah, exactly.
I'm not doing good here, guys. And people kept saying, use the bolt gun. I'm like, fuck that thing.
No, I
don't like-
put that thing away. I used it for 2 seconds. I was like, guys, this ain't
Yeah.
it. This is not
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
I remember just one of those things I loved is the exploration. I love that they expanded the lake sequence.
Oh,
and
yeah.
just what.
Getting
so
the
I saw
gas
that
can
boat
and
out.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Saw that boat out there. Like, oh, let me explore this boat and open it. And bam, there's a red 9. I was like, oh my god, my love.
And it's
my one true
free.
love.
Yeah, and it's free
It's
too,
free.
which is awesome. That was. I like the fact that they and they kind of hinted, little bits of RE5 in there too. Like you can go to different parts in the boat too, which is kind of cool. They had the
Yeah.
little island with the chickens on it with the gold egg that you can find, and I like little things like that. Because it's hinting at stuff to come, but also like it just gives you more of like that feeling of like, yeah, I can explore this extra section, get the treasures, and I can benefit financially from the merchant, which is also has side missions and you can hunt the fish and stuff. Just really cool little things that they just moved around a little bit, but they didn't like, take anything that really made it feel like, there was a significant cut. Besides, like we mentioned, like, some of the rooms being trimmed a little bit, stuff in the island on the back end, but even then it was like it really kept the integrity and the vibe of RE4, which is really all you can ask for as a fan. You didn't want that. I mean, it's a near perfect game already, so it's like now going and adding the more modern remake spin that they've been doing since RE2. I mean, I think it just passed 5 million sales, which is just wild.
Oh wow.
So it's selling like hotcakes and people love it. But yeah, I agree in terms of the there's little things too. Like I saw those changes from the original, and I was like, okay, I still like the original though just as much. I mean, I know it's people could say this can replace it, whatever. That's all a matter of opinion. That's fine. But I always look at like nothing replaces the originals either. I like both of them on the same. It's like RE1 original and remake, where I still love remake 1 is still my favorite remake of all time, like hands down, right? But I
Yeah.
still love the original RE1 because it just goes so well. It has a certain feeling that even 2 and 3 doesn't have, and it kind of goes with it but it goes so well as a trilogy. And I don't know, I like seeing those different discussions of like what people think their favorite remake is, because it's just all a matter of like opinion. But it's also like some people just prefer the older style, like you mentioned, right? Like the older style of Resident Evil. A reason why I can go back and play the fixed camera angle games to this day and stream them or play the remake. I was in that pocket during that time. Like that's what I knew. And for me, it's not like I can't go back once I play something else that's so like different, like, oh well, this works in a modern way. I still like the fact that there's some like limitations with the technology back then, or limitations with the camera angles or the loading times. Like there's still something to that I like, and maybe we're just old school like that, or some of us fans, we're like, okay, we could still enjoy the remake for what it was, but there's always going to be that impact that original game left on us, and
Yeah.
So I like looking at it as both of them I can play to this day. Like I can go back and play, I got the Oculus over here. Like I can play that in VR, like RE4, which is like the original RE4, but in VR, and just have just as much fun with that game, as RE4 Remake, even though RE4 Remake does have a lot more layers to what it has, but I don't know. It's just a charm that I get from the originals as well. So I like them both.
And I gotta say too, like, again, everyone can have their own opinion on things, but regarding that narrative that I've seen going around, where this replaces the original, you don't have to go back and play the original ones now because these take its place. I don't agree with that narrative. If anything, I would say that the remakes give you more incentive to play the originals after all said and done, because to me, it's see where it came from exactly. Like, see, like, well, what was the original product of this like, and what was it how was it so great that it warranted this new reinterpretation of it? To me, it's like, finding like a band that you're just introduced to, and like they're a huge massive hit. Like imagine just getting turned on to, like, off the top of my head, like a band like Foo Fighters, and loving, oh dude, Dave Grohl, he's an awesome dude, he makes great songs, this guy's insane, I want to look more into this guy. And then boom, you trail it back, and then you find this little band called Nirvana. It's interesting to see the history of where these things come from.
Absolutely.
So seeing how great, like for instance, the first remake, that thing is, I am still blown away by how much it progressed from the original game of RE1. Like you look at the two, and like how, like,
it's such a short period of time too. Like the jump between original PlayStation to one of the best eras in gaming, in my opinion, was during that PS2, GameCube, Xbox, as all of them are really trying to push. And that GameCube was a powerhouse. That was the last time Nintendo really cared about graphics. Let's be honest. I mean, that game, if you play it on a CRT, it still looks good to this fucking day. You're like, holy shit.
I got my GameCube back there that technically isn't mine. I actually borrowed it from a friend when I was still in high school and never gave it back to him. He doesn't care at this point. But I still play like on a friend's CRT TV. Like my buddy at the tattoo shop he goes all out for the old school stuff.
Cool.
So at his house, he's got an entire man cave of old school Nintendo and stuff. And I helped him load one of those old fashioned big CRT TVs from like the late 90s. Like we drove about an hour north to a town because like, hey, you want to hitch a ride with me? I'm gonna need some help carrying this thing. It's
a monster,
200-pound TV. Yeah. So I played it on there, and the remake still looks gorgeous on that.
Yeah, man. I mean, there's just something about that era, and like also just the quality of games being released, and they were complete. They had that sense of like, this is done. And there isn't going to be an update to fix this bug in a couple weeks. Like the only time they would actually fix little things is when they were able to do a greatest hits release. But that would be like if it got to that point where they could re-release it and fix the little things here and there. But most of the time it was done. I didn't
even know that greatest hits was like they had patches in them. I thought greatest hits releases were just like, hey, here's like a DualShock version.
Right. Sometimes they'll do that. It depends. Like I know they did that with Mortal Kombat Trilogy. There was a problem with the FMVs, so when they put it out, they're able to release it or change it when they put it out again. So like little things like that are very interesting, because I think there's things that make it I don't know, just more like when you have it in your hand, it's done. But thankfully with RE4, we didn't really get there. The main thing that was like suffering at first was more so some performance dips on everything, on the X, on PlayStation, on PC. So there was little things here and there, but then the PC stuff got fixed pretty quickly, and little things like that. So it worked out. But I think the going back and playing it, I still have a feeling of wanting to go back and play like RE4 original. At least recently, I was like, oh man, I kind of am in the mood to go back and play, the original, even before the remake, because I'm still trying to like, do stuff with the remake in terms of like, some video content or things that I've been thinking about with what we got presented in RE4 Remake that would make good talking points. Like, now that the game's been covered to death and reviewed to death, what else can I, talk about? Or if it's videos that more so talk about like comparing the two, and like now that we've had time to digest RE4 Remake and then kind of go back and play the original, like something like that, like those kind of ideas of like, okay, maybe I could do a video on this where it's not just like the typical like, all right, I'm going to talk about this person's backstory. Like everyone knows a lot of these people's backstories in these games at this point, and there's been videos on there for months on this stuff. So I was always thinking like, what can I do differently? And then within having that thought of like, oh yeah, the original RE4, like I still want to go back and play that. That just comes up of like a whole video topic in and of itself. Like, do remakes replace originals? Or it's all subjective, but it's like, it just makes you think about that. Like, and for us, like we would say no, like I just think they both can exist in their lanes of modern and old school, but we appreciate it because we kind of go back and play old stuff anyway, like gamers like us, so we appreciate that stuff. But I understand like it's more streamlined for people that have been playing the more recent games, and that's what it's for. It's bringing in that pool of people that have played 7 and 8 and played 2 and 3 remake that didn't, maybe they fell off an RE years ago. So now that it's done and Capcom put out Death Island, now we're just kind of like, all right, now what? What's going to be next? And again, like we mentioned, Separate Ways, I think, is going to be the next thing, and maybe that Mercenaries update.
What I would say would also be a wise choice for them to do, because I don't know if the narrative for Capcom as well was they were, with releasing these remakes, that they would hope that, okay, now people are just going to care about the remakes. That takes care of the convoluted mess of having this original timeline now. So there, job's all said and done. Like, no. Now people are seeing that this is a remake. You're going to have a lot of people interested in seeing what the original product was, which is why I think, and I don't know what's taking them so long, release a remastered version of the classic trilogy.
Oh, yeah.
Come on, dude. That is a no-brainer. And I'm seeing people actually on PlayStation Network buying the games. Like, I know that Director's Cut was available, and I just saw someone post that the original Resident Evil 2, you can pick that up. I haven't tried looking for that, but is that the case?
So, not the original 2 or 3, but the original Director's Cut is up there, but it's behind a subscription wall. So you have to sign up for their third or second tier, or maybe even the first tier of their PlayStation, which I refuse to do because I just don't play PlayStation like that to pay for that service, but also like I should just be able to buy it by itself, and I was able to do that with Twisted Metal 2. Twisted Metal 2 went on there, and it said, sign up to play, but then when I clicked the little dots next to it, it was like, or just download, because I owned it on PS3. So it honored those, because this Director's Cut is a different version. It's essentially the original Director's Cut without the wacky music, but it uses analog sticks, which the other one didn't have DualShock support. And it has, so it's kind of like a different hybrid version of Director's Cut, but they don't have 2 and 3. And I haven't played the Director's Cut on there because I just refuse to sign up for the service, because it's like, if I already pay for one service, I'm not going to pay for the other one. And a lot of games are cross-play, so I don't need PS Plus to play. Like, if I'm playing Call of Duty on Xbox, well, then why am I going to play, why am I going to sign up for PS Plus? I'm not playing anything on there. All the games that I play now are cross-play, if I'm playing on PC or I'm playing on Xbox. So I understand if people like to check it out with signing up, but I think fans should just be able to buy it for $6 or $10 or whatever they're asking for it. And why isn't 2 on there? Why isn't the original 3 on there? And maybe people say, okay, well, it's between Sony and Capcom and blah, blah, blah. But regardless of that, Sony's lack of backwards compatibility on their store still makes me upset to this day, because now they're adding stuff. Like, their service has been out for a year, but like, where's Dino Crisis? And I know Metal Gear is now coming out in the collection, so that's disregarded, but where's Medieval? Where's, Duke Nukem? Where's the rest of the Twisted Metal games? 3 and 4. You have 1 and 2 and Twisted Metal Black, but you don't have 3 and 4. You don't have, like, little things like that. Just, I'm like wondering, like, why? Why does the PS3, PS1 selection have so much of a rich library? Where's Soul Reaver? Where's Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver? Where is it? I just wish that they kind of move their ass a little bit, and I know it might be between them and the developers, but like you said, if Capcom decides to do that trilogy, and maybe when this Metal Gear Solid collection fucking flies through the roof, because it'll sell like hotcakes, it might encourage people to go back and do some of those collections, because why not, man? We're playing, like the seamless HD versions, right?
I was just about to say, dude, the seamless HDs. You know what? Fine, let them take care of it because they're doing a way better job than what they're doing.
Yes, exactly, man. And so we have to leave it to the fans. And I was saying this on stream, to do what, to do things that that have that knowledge, that do what we can't. Like, we don't know how to design games and code that, recode stuff, or whatever they got to do to make that work. Team X, I mean, they're killing it, and anyone should check that out. I mean, RE1 has never looked this good. RE2 never looked that good. 3, I mean, the originals, and a lot of people are just like, man, I might just get a PC just for that. Like they were just saying in the chat, just to be able to play emulated games or other games that are not attainable, And I do think at the end of the day, yes, some people should have knowledge of that if they can get their hands on it, but I also think someone should just be able to come home from a long day, turn on their console, and if they want to play something on that console, they can play. It's called PlayStation. It's supposed to be the station that you play everything. You should be able to just turn on that, turn on the store, play, pop up RE2 or 3 or 1 and just play it how you want to play it, or any game that you want. Or obviously if they do a collection, it will be on everything, which would be cool. You know, it would be on Xbox and PC, and like Code Veronica has never been on PC ever. There's literally just the X version that you got to get on PlayStation, or the HD version that you can get on Xbox. But Code Veronica, again, it's almost like if they did that trilogy, I would have liked them to plop in Code Veronica in there, but I know they probably wouldn't do that. But that'd be so cool, because man, it's Code Veronica complements everything in those 3 games as well, because it's so connected, especially in that 1998 capsule of events. So like you said, man, what are they doing? I really hope this Metal Gear thing just raises some eyebrows of wow, we can just put this stuff over, and and those games are very minimal as well. Like Metal Gear, there's different, you're going from PS1 to PS2 to PS3, so I know there might be more to making that work, but for PS1 stuff, dude, let's just do it, man. It's money. 27 years on, are they going to wait to the 30th anniversary? Maybe.
Don't see why they would, though, because that's kind of like a numbers game that way. You want to wait on making money. I mean, that doesn't seem like
that's true, and it doesn't seem like Capcom's slowing down, right? It just seems like they're constantly they're building momentum. They're in the pocket right now. When I started this podcast in 2012, they were not in the pocket. They were almost done. Yeah. People forget, but they were almost done. RE6, it sold well, but there was a lot of negative press, and there was really bad rumors of what was going down with RE at the time, and not just RE, but Capcom in general, financially, what's going on. And so they've repelled back, with just all this stuff over the past 10 years, which us fans were happy to see, but I think there's also going to be a lot of people that, they just want to have a way to play it, because again, the physical stuff, for collectors, it's only gone up. Disc rot is a thing, you know what I mean? These discs might not even last for God knows how long, you know what I mean? That's why you got to back up your stuff. If you have your discs and stuff, back them up to a hard drive, keep them on the shelf, do what you got to do, but just it's nice to have everything all in one spot as well. And I think the seamless stuff that we just mentioned is a great way, because everybody has their stuff on their PC. You plug in a controller and you can just play. You can plug in a PlayStation controller, Xbox controller, any gamepad, and it just works. And that's awesome. So people can actually experience the originals in a more presentable way, I guess, for at least more modern audiences that, like you said, it's worth checking out those original games.
Mm-hmm. Just to see where everything's come from, and to it again, like you mentioned, it's like a time capsule. Because not only is especially 1 and 2, not only are those games set in 98 and 96 respectively, but because they were made then, they had that layer of authenticity to them.
Absolutely.
Same thing with 3. It's you could try a lot of things, especially with that recent Welcome to Raccoon City movie and other stuff out there to try to emulate or pretend to be set in that period. It's not the full deal. It's always something interesting to see it of its time and place. It's that layer of authenticity. You just can't really nail it down anywhere else.
Yeah.
Unless maybe you're Quentin Tarantino or some shit.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's you just have to have a way of I think, especially now, because there's, a lot of, I guess the last thing I wanted to kind of bring up here is like with the wave of like nostalgia and remakes being a thing, and we see this thing in movies, like this era of remakes in movies, or we see like, the eras and remaking of games. And I don't think we talked about it last time, but like, do you think that the well will eventually run dry with some of these remakes to the point where they're going to have to just revert to either new IPs or new just entries in general instead of like constantly? I mean, obviously there's money to be made. They're not going to stop. Max Payne 1 and 2, like some of our favorite games are also being in the process of being remade. But do you think, like, in your opinion, do you think that it's a little too much if we just constantly just keep going backwards, we keep trying to tap that nostalgia, vein, so to speak, and just try to get that kind of rush? Do you think like it's a little too much if we keep doing this for the next, like, not just RE, but just in general? You see a lot of this stuff come back. Like, what's your take on that?
I think that the initial like tapping that nostalgia rush was like the idea at the beginning of it. Like, and this remake trend started, what, like a couple, like only a few years ago. I guess with the advent of, or the release of Resident Evil 2 remake,
Right, that kind of kicked the doors down. Right.
That kind of, yeah. I think at first it was a bit of like a nostalgia rush, return to the original, what made that series good, and a lot of other companies saw that move and decided to take that power play move as well. The way I see it moving forward is we're obviously not going to see the end of remakes anytime soon, but I think the decision behind releasing a remake now for a lot of companies is to either A, bring attention back to that IP for a new entry into the series, or bring attention back to the developers of that IP and let them see, look, this is what we've done. Here's this new project we got in the pipe. If you liked how we treated this game with our game design and our approach, well, check out this new project that we got. And I think it might be a bit of a flimsy example, but to me, that's kind of like what with Remedy, what they've been doing with, like, they got the Max Payne 1 and 2 remakes coming out. They're now launching the sequel for Alan Wake 2, but they had recently, their newest IP wasn't too long ago. It was Control, and I do feel like I don't think it's in their plans to make a new Max Payne, although it'd be great if they did. I think it would be wise to just let it be, but I wouldn't be against the fourth game. But they are a gaming company that really tries to push onto the next limit, onto the next level of what their games are. So to me, they're now releasing a new entry into an established franchise and a remake. So I think what they're trying to do is bring attention to Remedy, get that financial income, get that money coming up so that they can put out a new product. Because, if you make a great game and you put out a new product, you're going to want to see what they can do with something new. Whereas, I think it's one of those two things. Either they're going to they do these remakes to hype attention for a new entry into that series that's remade, or get a bunch of hype for a new product they want to launch.
Yeah.
So that's where I see this next leg of remakes is going to be. And hopefully after that, it's done.
That's the thing, too. I think, like you mentioned, and I think a lot of things, even like Silent Hill, where they're trying to do the same thing, like RE, where they have they're bringing back 2, which I wish they did 1 first, but I know 2 is like the breadwinner, so they're going to be like, yeah. But they're doing like a mainline Silent Hill and a remake. So just like RE, where it's like they're trying to, appease the old fans and I guess somewhat new fans too with like the current stuff, and then go back like stuff like Alone in the Dark, which is finally coming out. Which of course is, that's been gone for a while. Silent Hill's been gone for a while. So I think the good thing, and even Alan Wake 2, which, I don't know if you're excited for, but I already looked at it. I haven't finished the first game, but I'd like to and stream it, but I'd like to stream the second one when it comes out, because the survival horror boom is really big right now, and I think it came back in a strong way, and I think obviously Capcom definitely had to do with that, has plenty to do with that. And I think at least we're getting, and that content, as long as it's good content, it's coming from a good place. Like, like even like Clock Tower is getting remastered, like the original, like it's crazy to see this era of not only content creators and streamers kind of diving into it, but like seeing all these new games push different things and try different things, and someone like Remedy, who like they don't mess around when it comes to developing stuff. And I think with Alan Wake 2, I mean, just from what I've seen, and I'm not even like into Alan Wake like that, but I may be when I finish it. I was like, man, this look like they're really trying to make this a lot more grittier and even like kind of, again, more survival horror, like Sam Lake said. Like that's kind of what they're trying to push towards, and I'm all for it, man. I mean, I'm all for this era of new stuff to experience. I did enjoy Callisto. I know some people didn't. It wasn't the most perfect game, but I actually really enjoyed it for what it was. And I like the Dead Space remake. I thought that was really well done. And I didn't play the Callisto DLC yet, but again, I plan on doing that. So I'm just happy to see that there's stuff coming out. And then we got RE4 after that. So we got like 3 horror games back to back to back. And then you got Alan Wake 2 coming out in the fall. Silent Hill 2 doesn't have a date yet, but that's probably around the corner. Probably not this year because we haven't seen a date up until summer. So I feel like it might be next year at some point. But I'm just happy to see it come back. But like you said, also to bring attention to where it came from. I'm streaming the original Silent Hill 2 right now because the members and the Patreon supporters voted, and that obviously got an overwhelming response. Alan Wake got a decent amount of votes, but Silent Hill 2 obviously got the winner there. But I just love going back and playing it, talking about it, experiencing it. It's only my second playthrough of Silent Hill 2 ever. So for me, it's still like a new thing. There's so many horror games that I haven't even played that I'm going to go back to and stream and showcase on my channel that, gives people a little bit of a break from RE, but it's also in that lane of survival horror in that era that I mentioned. Like there's Fatal Frame, there's Cold Fear, the list goes on. But I definitely plan on, trying to, stream a little bit more of those games that I haven't even experienced yet, as well as the new ones, because it's really a good time to be not only a Resident Evil fan, but survival horror.
Man, I really got to get back into finishing Cold Fear, because that was one that I remember there was a time after Resident Evil 4 came out that you had the initial clones that try to copy that same formula.
Right.
And there's a couple other games that I played that played out like Resident Evil 4 because they want to do that over-the-shoulder horror action approach. And Cold Fear was one of those ones that I picked it up on Steam. It's sitting right here.
Oh, wow, it is on Steam. Okay.
Yeah, because I picked that one up, and yeah, I think the interesting thing to note too for horror games now, especially for this resurgence in survivor horror, is playing the mods that people have released. Granted, you got to get the original base game to play them, but for me, like the Half-Life games have just the most incredible community of mods, of single-player mods that people have made, TC, Total Conversion mods.
Yeah.
I don't know if I mentioned it in the last talk with you, but there's one mod that stood out the most for me that you can actually get it on Steam by itself now. It's called Cry of Fear. That thing it's like, it takes elements of Resident Evil and Silent Hill and mixes them together, but it is just psychological horror to a really, really dark level.
Wow.
And it plays out like it's a first-person perspective, and it's made by this great developing team that was based out in Sweden, and they released the game like, I want to say like 10 or 12 years ago. But it's twisted, and it's got a lot of like puzzle solving elements, backtracking elements, collecting,
a lot of nods to OG
system.
survival horror.
Yeah. And in seeing, and that was just a team of people that made that, and it's all you got to do is just go into like moddb.com or something, look up single player survival horror games, and just the plethora that you find there. That is something that I would think that, hey, if this resurgence in mainstream survival horror is coming around, go look at what the underground has been making, because you'll find some great stuff.
I'm happy you brought that up, because that is a really good point. I, especially this summer, have been trying to play a little bit more mods, stream more mods, because I usually don't do that type of thing. Not that I was ever against it, but sometimes it's hard for me to get it to work or hard for me to install it. But man, like that RE3, playing as Nemesis mod, like that is hilarious. And it's like,
dude, I
so
gotta
fun.
ask you, so you got to play that with the same way that you would play, was it Lord of the Necropolis? Lord of the Necropolis? Do you need a Japanese version of RE3?
Yeah, it's like the Source Next version. I think it's
Source Next.
I guess it's technically the Chinese version of it. I think
Chinese version.
I think, but yeah. So you use that, and you pretty much use that with the files that are for that mod, and it's kind of like a
Yeah.
I can send you the files too if you need them. Just let me know because yeah, they're it's very easy. The only problem is I had to play with the keyboard. I couldn't for that.
Oh,
mod.
dude.
For that mod, I couldn't because the other HD ones I was able to plug in the controller. Maybe I wasn't getting it right, but I had to play with a keyboard for RE3. So I was like, okay, this takes me back to 2001 when I was playing RE3 on my Dell computer.
Oh, dude, I gotta do. I mean, I'm old school. I gotta do keyboard.
Yeah.
The arrow keys, Z, X, C,
There you
V.
go.
I'm good.
Yeah.
My hands are ready to go.
Oh yeah, man. I was gonna say, so you'll get a kick out of it, man. I love that mod, and I know there's a lot of other things that I haven't played that people are like, you got to do Kendo's mod, you got to do this, and that. And like you said, it brings a whole new like life to these games, but also it's just more content for us to talk about, do videos on, live stream, because, you play these games day in, day out every year, and, or you put some stuff down for a while, you pick it back up, and, kind of like how Code Veronica was. It's like I didn't play that for a couple years. Now I'm trying to do more of like a LTRE dive where I'm like playing it, streaming it a couple times, maybe completing it, maybe getting the platinum, and then kind of trying to compile and type up a review, do a podcast on it to where I can really dissect it and start to appreciate it more, because I've appreciated Code Veronica more over the years, a lot more actually, because I wasn't really too fond of it as when I was younger, because I never beat it because it was fucking hard for me, and I never got the guidebook for that one. I had the guidebooks for all the other ones, but not Code Veronica. I had it for Dreamcast, but just didn't beat it until like way later. And so I was always like, man, it's very challenging. I'm not very good at it, but I'm trying to get good. I'm trying to get better. I'm trying to like get stuff down to like a timely fashion. I think my last playthrough was 9 hours. That's still a chunk of a game that I can definitely because I don't memorize all the puzzles. I don't, I'm still trying to maneuver that. Like that and Zero are very challenging. Zero for its own reasons, because of its mechanics of the switching and the dropping weapons on the floor, no item box. And I screwed myself on Code Veronica, man. Like I would leave the extinguisher in the item security box, and I couldn't get the Magnum for Chris, and that made Alexia difficult. And everyone was like, you got screwed by the game, and I was like, I didn't even know you could do that. Like there's still things I'm still trying to maneuver to this day, but that's what's fun about it.
You gotta admire that too. That this like that game is a perfect example of how the game can actually fight back against you. Like mistake stuff that I don't even know how the developers missed it. You know what'd be funny if they deliberately put that in there?
Yeah.
Like, oh no, wait, hey, we figured this thing out. If you don't get this item that we don't even tell you about, it'll make the game fucking harder for them.
Yeah,
like,
and it's like, dude,
that would be so funny.
It almost seems like a lot of those older games, especially, were just more. They're just unforgiving. Now things are more. I mean, some people could say the opposite for some other genre type games, but I think, man, that was like, yeah, I did not know. Now when I play Code Veronica, I will make sure I never make that mistake again. I probably didn't make it back in the day when I streamed it on the other playthrough, but now it's like, okay, like I'm learning, how to maneuver and how to get through those sections without making it seem like I have to pick up a bunch of different items and make sure they're in the box for Chris, because that's what I messed up too, because you would swap, and then there's that section where like you got to get Claire out before the Steve fight, and then you're with Claire for that little section, and I accidentally like kept the grenade launcher on Claire, didn't put it back in the box like a fucking idiot, and I have like 40 grenade rounds that I can't use, and I'm just like, why, chat room? Like, and my saves, of course, were all on the, like after you switch from Claire the first time, so there was no way of like getting some of that stuff back, and I was like, dude, I screwed myself even more. I still beat it, and I didn't really get like stuck, but I was like, no way. Like the chat room was like, yeah, this is you're beat, and I was just like, dude, I don't know how I'm going to do this. But again, that's what's fun about it. It's like up against that challenge. Like, man, do I have enough ammo for this? Do I have to reload this save? I mean, that's all what's fun. Like seeing just that refreshing, playthrough of it, but also like just the genuine like reactions of just like, oh man, I just got screwed over here, especially when it's a game you don't know. Like that's the one that like Silent Hill 2, like I'm looking at the map. I'm like, guys, like you're going to see this playthrough, and like, I'm sorry, this might not be entertaining. I'm going to be checking the map every other second. Don't know where I'm going. Things look the same, like, so it's it's part of that I think is why people like seeing it, because they like seeing those, they might have played it 20 times, but I only played it, this is my second playthrough. So it's kind of funny that now the roles are kind of reversed now, because I play RE all the time. Now I'm playing other things, but I like that. I like getting out of my comfort zone. It's fun. It's fun.
Like one thing I want to say really quick is people make such a big deal about like the zapping system in Resident Evil 2. Honestly, I think the zapping system in Code Veronica is way more prominent. Like, just the fact that it can fuck you over so many times.
Oh, yeah.
Like, how many times have you fucked yourself over in Resident Evil 2 from keeping an item or leaving it behind? No, like, they perfected it, but they perfected a monster is what they did in Code Veronica.
Yeah, especially what you have to deal with in Code Veronica, and, like, some of the stuff that you're up against in that game. Like, you really need to make sure that you have, like, not only enough healing, because I was running low on healing, but I think some of the ammo, you do get plenty of it, but it's just like you said, like those little things of keeping stuff in the box so it carries over, and knowing. See, for me, I thought that section of Chris or Claire was like longer, so I had more time. I didn't realize the switch happened within a cutscene, and I was like, fuck, I didn't remember that. Like, I didn't remember. Like, I should have remembered. Like, those little things now I'm a lot more aware of, But yeah, man, so I wanted to obviously just kind of bring things back around, because I know I know you got to get going soon. Carrier episode coming out and stuff like that. I know that there's plans for you to obviously continue. But do you think that this next episode will be something that you've already? I mean, I'm sure you map stuff out, but like, are you going to be just starting to work on it when it's time, or are you going to already start piecing the stuff together for the future of your series?
I've already got pieces of it worked on, but previously there's already photo shoots I got done. This one is definitely, because I'm taking a bit more time with the third one. It's not gonna be a year long,
right,
of a wait. That was more so because that first episode was really the first real episode I made. That prequel episode that I put out, that was just me and maybe a couple of friends recording their voices for me, but that whole episode was just one person. That was me, so that's why I was able to get it done like that. That second one, now I actually have other people in it. I actually have to go and meet people and keep them constantly in the loop. I have to go get their voices done. Now I have to not just keep track of myself, but keep track of them too. It's like running a band.
Yeah.
So now I have other people got to stay on top of. So now going from that to this was like, well, now I'm incorporating even more people. Not only that, but I have some very prominent people in the Resident Evil community. Hell, people involved in the games that are in this episode now. So the scale just got raised, or the bar got set even higher. So now I'm trying to just keep that. It's going to keep getting raised, or I have to keep raising that bar, but to a level that I can reach out to.
Sure.
So this third one is definitely going to go heavier into the action side. I've already plotted out what the intro sequence is. There's going to be more actual gunfire sequences in it. I already have my Max Payne shoot dodge sequence mapped out and done, or started.
Hell yeah. So
that's going to be in there. So that's why it's going to take a little bit more time just to fine tune the effects to make it sell. But no, it's going to be there, and yeah, it'll come around when it's ready. And there are people that I'm reaching out to as well that I want involved on this too. Not to make any kind of solid confirmations, but maybe some members of Row might be making a couple of cameos in the episode 3.
That's awesome. If you ever need a voice too, I'm always here. I always would like to do some voice acting at some point. I've never done it, but people are like, man, you should consider doing like voices, and I've never done it, but I've always liked to. So just if you ever need an extra hand, I'm always around. Just let me know.
I mean, honestly, I'll just put this description out there. To me, you fit the look and build of someone who could play Enrico Marini. So that's a character that I guess I can just spoil it. That's a character that I'm gonna have in the next episode.
Okay.
But I will say, like, there is the idea of doing kind of, Andy and I talked about this, and I feel okay in putting this out there, about doing kind of like spin-off stories that are under the Carrier umbrella. So playing around with the idea that Carrier is like, I guess, an anthology type sequence, but having more than one story than just the Detective Sam Othic story. So, for instance, he plugged this idea to me about doing a backstory for Brad Vickers, that explains his trauma, and the idea of it would be called Trauma. And to me, it's like, oh, dude, that's great. I already have an entire an inkling of an idea for that, because that's one thing I love doing, is taking a character that he's perceived as this coward and flipping that around as to, no, now you feel sympathy for him. So
There's
to
that
me,
backstory.
yeah, again, I don't know if I explained this in the last call because it feels like familiar territory to tread over, but he was, in my mind, he was, okay, he's a helicopter pilot. So this is set in the 90s. He is a helicopter pilot who most definitely flew during the Gulf War in like Iraq in the early 90s. And the story to me is, okay, he was flying around. His chopper got shot down in a skirmish. He's stranded in some, desert shanty town in Iraq under enemy fire. He's pinned down with his troops. He sustained some injuries, and it's a couple days long skirmish. And throughout the battle, there's multiple combatants and civilians that are caught in the crossfire that are just laying dead out in the streets. And in between points of gunfire, he looks out and he sees just stray, rabid dogs feasting upon the corpses. So that sight of like rabid, disease-ridden dogs, worn out down to the bones because they're starving, eating flesh of people, stuck with him. Which is why in 1998, when he's in with Alpha Team in the forest, he just takes off and leaves the minute that the Cerberus start to come around, because triggered a trauma. So the idea is, let's explain that backstory and give Brad a bit more of, characterization.
Right. Besides just like, just knowing him as the chicken heart, so to speak, it's like, all right, now we can really see what made him so skittish to begin with, because he's seen some shit. I love that, man. Yeah, that's really cool, and that's where, again, like you said, the little connections that you can make with, even though, again, like, the connection of like this Raccoon City, just all of the, like we were talking about earlier, like the layers of it. I love seeing those little backgrounds of that just from your perspective, and seeing how you carry that through with each episode, man. That sounds awesome that you have, some kind of game plan for already what's up and coming, and I'm sure the ideas keep coming. So that's awesome, man, to keep that creative flow going, especially when you see this response, because I think people are going to really, I think this is where people are going to be like, oh shit, like, now they're really invested now, because now with episode 1, and the pilot obviously, but like with 2, man, like I think that this will be, because the weight's been, it's pretty big at this point, the anticipation's there. So I think you're gonna hit it out of the park with this one, man.
Yeah, and it would be great if like it takes off and it gets some kind of notoriety that allows me to, I mean, in a perfect world, it would be like the episode does so great that out of the blue, all right, something nice happens and I can just quit my day job.
Right. Yeah, man.
All day long.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know that, again, like you're a creative person. You're always keeping the wheels moving. There's always on the grind, and I always respect that about you. And I hopefully people really got that from our first conversation too, because that was really kind of, you really went into your background and kind of what inspired you to do what you do today.
This is totally unintended. That date is actually it's the year anniversary that I actually met Andy in the UK, August 4th.
Oh, wow.
Because I flew out there last year because I was playing bass with a band that it's actually this weekend too. It's Rebellion Fest. It's a big, like, 2-day long or 3-day long punk rock music event that's out there in Blackpool in the UK. So I was playing bass, filling my bass with a band last year. We flew out there, decided to knock 2 birds out with one stone. The band drove from London up to the town, which is like 4, 8-hour drive. I said, you know what, you guys go ahead. I'm gonna hang back here. I'll take the train. I got to meet up with a friend, and we met up with Andy on August 4th. And there's a picture of me and him just standing outside of a pub.
That's amazing.
And I saw it's date, like, oh wow, like it's been 1 fucking year. Oh man, that's nuts.
Yeah, I met him with, obviously.
Yeah, you guys.
Yeah, RE
Challenger
and stuff. Yeah, and then we hung out again this year. So it was awesome, and Andy's great, and the fact that he was able to come and hang out and do the Dice Lock stream with us was it was so much fun. It was literally one of our favorite streams that I think we've all done collectively or individually. It was just so much fun, And yeah, Andy's a great guy. I can't say enough good things about those guys as well, and RE Challenger and everybody over there in the UK. And going back there was awesome too, just to see everybody and meet the fans. And UK is starting to feel like a home away from home in many ways, going back there 2 years in a row. And I really want to try to get over there next year again, and just keep the collaborations going and that networking going, just with hanging out with everybody, and just like we're all here because of RE. So it's like it all brought us together across the pond, so to speak. So yeah,
and
man.
My goal too is to get back out there with through Resident Evil and through music. Hopefully.
Nice, man.
Because I've been spending the time focusing on this band I got now. So I don't think we were really in any position to be like, hey, let's go put us onto this big,
Sure.
European-wide festival. So hopefully next year, fingers crossed,
You'll be doing some.
we'll be able to.
Yeah, doing some nice
traveling,
nice
doing
tours.
traveling.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. And yeah, real quick, where can people find you on your socials? You can plug, your band socials. You can do the RE stuff as well. Let everyone have it.
Sure. So for Carrier, you can find I have a Linktree that I now have a Linktree. I'm sophisticated.
I will put that down in description now. There you go. So that will be there.
But everything you can follow, it's Carrier_1998 on Instagram, on Twitter, Facebook. It's the full name. YouTube, it's the full name, Carrier, a Raccoon City Story. And you can find my personal Instagram too, Radio Reelin'. But that one, I kind of just post stuff between my band and the artwork on Carrier. Don't really do much else. Outside of Carrier, you can find my band page. We're called Sewerside Bombers. Actually, I got this custom-made engraved lighter that has the name on it. I don't know if you can read that.
Oh, wow. That's killer.
That was... well, it's
Yep, right
Sewerside.
There we go.
There we go. So like a sewer. Sewerside_bombers. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, same name. Spotify, all of our music's on there. You can find us on all digital platforms like Apple Music and all that stuff. And yeah, that's pretty much what I spend with my spare time is on that. And when I'm not doing the 9 to 5, I am then juggling time between the two. So yeah, we talk Resident Evil, and now I'm off to go play music.
There you go, man. Yep, time for a gig. I was gonna say it's time.
Time for a gig.
Yeah, man, definitely. Well, enjoy that gig. Enjoy the success that I know that you will get from this episode, and I know people are really excited about it. And obviously, best of luck with all the band stuff as well. And thank you so much for coming on, man. Anytime you want to come on, just let me know, and we can shoot the shit. It's always a good time.
Oh, absolutely. And I know one of these times we got to do one where we just do a complete deep dive. And I don't want to put it this way, but things that are like outside of Resident Evil. Like maybe with Resident Evil in there too.
Sure.
But got to do a full talk on Max Payne.
Oh, we have to, man.
All the way through.
Yeah, man.
All the way through.
Yeah, there's a lot there, man. There's a lot. That's still one of my favorite, series. So yeah, that has to be done. It has to be.
Yeah, because I got a lot to say about the movie too. Like again, it's one of those things. I didn't like it, but it had some great elements in it.
I agree. I actually
am
kind of a fan of that. Even though it's not perfect, but I still we could definitely have a great conversation on that. Definitely. Well, thanks again for being on here. Thanks everyone for listening, for watching. Check out the channels. You always know that you can find LTRE on all the digital platforms for this podcast: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Libsyn. Smash the like button, subscribe, and stay tuned for more LTRE content. And we will catch you next time. Take care, everyone.
So long, Internet.
Episode 2 of Carrier, a Raccoon City Story will be dropping August 10th at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Biohazard Declassified's channel. All the links are down below. Episode 2. Right place, wrong time.